we're going to disassemble the whole arm and build the permanent prosthesis in a permanent fashion. Okay, now, we fit the check socket, and we transferred the location of the myoelectric sensors from the holes in the socket onto the positive model, okay? And that's how we move the location of these things, because what's going to happen is all these components have to go into this prosthetic socket. This is the valve that's going to create a vacuum that allows her to suspend the prosthesis on her arm without it falling off. This is a vacuum suction valve here. This is the battery pack, which also has to be incorporated into the prosthetic socket, with the charger and the plug going into the hand to power the hand. Okay? These are the two myoelectric sensors that will be placed in the prosthetic socket, and the wires have to be fed down into the hand itself. The I-limb hand will then be attached to the outside of this prosthetic socket, and all the wires fed into the hand right here, where it has a friction wrist to allow rotation, but maintain the connection of all those electrical connections. So the secret to this whole thing is to be able to plan out the location for all these parts, so that at the end you have a cosmetically pleasing prosthesis, because one of the most important parts of this whole thing is cosmesis. Alright, so now here's the model. We've marked out where the position of the two batteries will go. One here, connected around the back of the arm up to the second one. We located the second one to be here because it'll be the most cosmetically unobtrusive. It'll end up actually right in here. And the other one, placed over here, is in an area of the hand where she's very small in volume, so we can fit that battery and fashion it into a cosmetic glove so you won't notice it. And of course the wiring is going to connect the two batteries here, and then the other wire will come out and reach down here to the plug where it's charged, and that second wire will come into the hand to power the hand. Over here is the location for the valve. You can see that pinpoint marked V. And this point over here, now marked P, is where the plug will go. And this plug will have to be exposed in the wrist area so that at night she can charge this hand up. This battery will give her one full day of operation, but it needs to be charged every evening. So the next step is to make the inner socket with the components from the myoelectric switches in place. Just those switches. After the inner socket is made, which we'll show you, then we're going to place the dummies for the battery system and the charging system. Of course, I'm sorry, the inner socket will also have the valve position. We'll have the valve on the inner socket and the two myoelectric sensors, dummies, placed in it. The dummies come with the unit, and these are just plastic models of exactly the shape of these myoelectric switches. So these will be placed on the model, will form over them, which will give us a cavity or a channel where we could then mount the switches later. Okay, we're ready to start forming this. As you can see, the dummies are in place, and the valve seat is in place. So we're going to take the plastic out of the oven and vacuum form the inner socket over these dummies. The plastic is now at forming temperature, stuff under 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Place a zip tie right around the valve. Beautiful.
It's a beautiful seal.
Yeah.
A vacuum right here.
Excellent.
Okay, so now after this inner socket was molded, you can see how it was molded over those dummies for the myoelectric switches. We've already sanded one out. See, this dummy is covered with plastic. It's already been sanded out of here. I'll show you how that's done in a moment. So that now we've created this cavity for the switch to drop in. Okay, we've also sanded out the opening for the valve, the suction valve. And now I'm going to warm up two pieces of plastic that match the silicone polyethylene that the inner socket is made of, and make two wedges in here that the battery will then sit on so that it levels out that surface. If you notice, there's a curve in this surface. So we sanded out the highest area. You can see a little dull in there. We've sanded out the highest area. Now I'm going to form these two pieces and put the plate on top of it while it's hot, and some pressure, push this down to make a nice flat level surface for the battery container. And you can see it as it starts to get red. You can zoom in a little bit. You'll see where it starts to get red. Where it's gone through. You'll see now. This plate will now be replaced by the finish plate in the outer socket. There you go, it's just a little bit of the adhesive left. If you can get any closer. Scrape that glue out, and now the final dummy is going to go in for the outer frame, which goes right like this. Okay? Clamp this down, see if we can get this to squeeze enough. Now we made a base so the batteries sit flat on top of the inner socket, so they don't rock around in there. Okay, so now we're laying out the channels for the electrical wires that are going to go from the switches, the batteries, to the hand. Okay, so you have one wire coming from the top battery to the second battery because they're connected. And then another wire comes out of that second battery, joins the two of them, goes into the hand to power the hand. So now we're going to make us another channel for this wire to go to the end of the socket. And this is just double stick tape that's going to give us the channels necessary. Now that we have the channels all in place, we'll take an impression of this whole thing to create the second generation for the socket for the prosthetic frame that will go over this inner socket. Okay, so now I'm feathering out the seam that was created when we formed the first socket, because we're going to alginate this whole product to make the model for the outer frame. And before we alginate, we decided to take the seam out because that's going to have to come out anyway. So we just use a dual action sander. A dual action sander.
And make sure it's Leon Russell.